My name is Clay Babcock. I'm the president of Senserva. And first of all, I really want to welcome you to our webinar on security drift management. I'm excited and thrilled to be your host for the next hour or so as we dive into probably one of the most critical but overlooked aspects of modern cybersecurity. But before I begin that, I want to just thank everyone for taking the time, to join us, and also I really want to thank our panelists, which I'm going to introduce here in a second. The other thing that I want to introduce is I want to mention that this webinar is sponsored by Microsoft. We're a Microsoft security provider, as a lot of our panelists actually. Microsoft's comprehensive tools are the foundation of a lot of how your organizations work right now, and they're a big part of the value that we bring to the ecosystem. And indeed, our drift management tools are really an extension of that. And so we're very, very happy and thrilled to be offering this seminar in conjunction with Microsoft today. And today's conversation really couldn't be more timely. As security configurations inevitably drift from their baselines, the organizations are facing a gap that a lot of them didn't even realize was happening, before something terrible happens. And there's all these bad, actors who are ready to exploit that. The good news is that, so we've assembled a panel of industry experts kind of across the board that are really able to discuss this at length, kind of looking at it from a big picture perspective. How do we actually solve these problems now? What are the benefits? And then working past that into what should we be looking on in the future. And so without any further ado, I want to introduce our panel here. And first up, we have Rod Trent. You want to just give a quick wave there? In our panel, he's going to be our big picture strategist. He's the kind of person who helps organizations kind of see the forest through the trees when it comes to security architecture, and particularly within Microsoft ecosystems. He brings over 20 years of experience working with Fortune 500 companies to implement robust security infrastructure solutions using Defender and Sentinel. And Rod, he's up late drinking coffee in Paris, joining us here because he really wanted to be a part of it. So thanks a lot for being here today. Next up, Riccardo Nicolini. He is the CTO of Bulletproof, one of our solution providers. Riccardo and I work closely pretty much on a daily basis, and I'm thrilled that he's here. He's on this panel, he's the person who's got his team and the organizations in the trenches actually working these problems. Some of us are talking about them, some of us are worried about them. Riccardo's in there trying to stop it, right? And so he's really got his eye on the tools that really add value to creating, high value, highly secure infrastructures. And he lets us know when we're doing something that's actually good, when we could be doing something better. And he's very quick to point out things that we can do that'll make our solution better. And so I'm very pleased to have him on the panel here as well today. And then last up, we have Jim Youngbauer. Jim is the president of a large consulting company, and he's really kind of here as our voice of the customer. He's going to keep us grounded in practical terms, and really know kind of what organizations are seeing and what they're hearing and what they're afraid of, when it comes to cybersecurity, and in particular into drift management. So Jim, very, very happy you're here, and we're about ready to get started. The one thing I wanted to do before is we kick off the panels, I kind of wanted to set the stage. And the biggest thing I want to say is that, configuration drift management isn't just, it's a technical nuisance. It's not just something that, it's the latest buzzword that people are starting to talk about. It actually is a term that describes a business risk, right? That's showing gaps in compliance and vulnerabilities and operational inefficiencies. And without effective management of these small discrepancies, just compound and grow over time. And the fact that these organizations and these security postures are getting so complex, it's very hard to keep track of that. And so what I'd like to do is start this discussion and jump into our first topic that we're going to go around in. And Ron, I'd like to first talk about the problem and the impact. And I'll start out with this: can you paint a picture for us? What's the true issue with drift, and particularly in Microsoft-centric environments? Many environment executives are starting to hear about configuration drift, but might not fully grasp the implications for their organization.
Okay, appreciate the question, and I love that, the ability to be able to kind of level set and get us where we need to be, I think, for the remainder of our discussion today. I do, unfortunately, Clay, I have to correct a couple things that you said early on. You said this is a timely discussion. I think it's overtime for this, honestly, because I think people will understand that as we go through this discussion today. This is something that is clearly evident and has been going on for a long time. We're just now kind of associating or being able to associate it with security, because security is kind of a key underpinning of everything that we do these days. The other thing I have to correct, it's thank you so much for saying 20 years, but it's like 30 years, I think, is my career. I know I don't look like it, but I appreciate that so much. But yeah, to get us level set, configuration drift and get it more into the security piece of it, it really refers to this phenomenon where the configuration settings of systems kind of they diverge over time, right, for numerous reasons, from their intended state. So there's this pristine state where we set up a system, and then over time something changes. We kind of call this drift or configuration drift. It can occur because of several factors. A few of them would be something like, of course, manual changes. That's probably one of the most obvious. Somebody makes a change on one system, they don't make it across the entire infrastructure. Software updates over time. If one system is updated and another system is not. I think one of the other clear identifiers is patching. Right? If patching is done, maybe not consistently across the entire estate, or I think even for organizations that have multi-tiers, a lot of times they have different policies around their patching. So they may patch at different times, or unfortunately, sometimes never. And these patches really are kind of the basis of security anyway, right? So they're not being applied across all these systems. In a centric environment, this configuration drift poses a significant challenge because of the complexity and the interconnectivity of all those systems that are involved together. But then just beyond the configuration piece, this is where I kind of put my energy here at Microsoft, is on the security piece of this. I think for the longest time, again, the past 30 years that I've talked to IT pros and organizations, it's been about the configuration. Okay, so we have a piece of equipment that is non-compliant or it's out of configuration. Let's just fix that configuration. But what a lot of people don't understand, a lot of those things are sitting out there for 6 months, a year, sometimes 2 years. There's things sitting in corners, still operating and still providing services that nobody really seems to care about. But they find out at one point that it's absolutely critical, and that thing has not been updated for a length of time. It is so far out of compliance that it has created a security flaw or a security gap in that environment. So this configuration drift can actually lead to security vulnerabilities, operational inefficiencies, who hates it when one of their services isn't available, and also, we don't think about this, but compliance, right? As our industry has evolved, right, we are more insistent, or at least the regulatory services are more insistent on us keeping up to date with our regulatory compliance. And if you can't tell that regulatory compliance commission that all of these systems are up to date and uniform, there's no way that you can tell them that you're going to be secure. We talk a lot these days around cybersecurity insurance. That's a very real thing, right? So if you can't provide that reporting to say that everything is up to date, you're also out of compliance with those regulatory policies and stuff like that, not just from the cybersecurity and being attacked by an actual threat, but also having to answer to someone else the reason why you're not compliant, right? So that's kind of the baseline, I guess. But by being able to monitor, and we'll talk about this as we go on, how we can actually accomplish and mitigate this. By doing so, businesses can protect their Microsoft security investments and actually maintain a robust, resilient IT environment just by knowing that their systems are up to date and all compliant across the board.
Excellent. Well, thanks for that. And the one thing that I took out of that often gets overlooked is that it's not just an internal functional state. There's also the regulatory things. It's where even if there hasn't been an issue or an active breach, the fact that you're out of compliance can cause regulatory issues. It can cause potential lawsuits, and there's a lot of collateral damage that can happen where that's kind of outside of the scope of what people think of when an organization has suffered a security breach. So that was fascinating insight. Ricardo, on to you, and thinking about this from a deployment perspective, how, and specifically around Senserva's drift management solution, how do you see this manifest itself kind of in a day-to-day basis as you're working with multiple organizations that have entrusted your organization with their security?
Yeah, no, that's very interesting question, Clay, because it sort of gets it from where Rod left, from that high-level view of it's not only about security configuration, it's about configuration, period, right? It's as important, that security configuration is as important as your infrastructure configuration, and so much more these days when we're talking about infrastructure as code. We're talking about security as code, and we have expanded our CI/CD cycles that are so common to the development world to the other parts of our technology stack that are not so common. And then when you bring this into security and security operations, the first realization for us from the perspective of someone doing security operations for other companies is that we live in this co-managed world where we do the security operations and our clients are the owners and the managers and the providers for their environments. So in that sense, when you recognize that, and then you go and also recognize that the configuration of the security stack is actually the soul of the service you provide, that the stability, the integrity of that configuration becomes something that you really need to pursue, really need to guarantee. There are so many security solutions that we can talk about, but in Bulletproof, we really focus on the Microsoft security stack. And to talk about one of the solutions in that stack, when you talk about, for example, Defender for Endpoint, and by the way, this is true for many other endpoint security solutions. Defender for Endpoint could be the best endpoint security solution or the worst endpoint security solution. It all depends on the configuration you deploy with Defender. So based on those things, we really started thinking we need not only a way to guarantee that the security configuration is intact, it also needs to be up to date, because everything that we have lived in the last 5 years with transition to cloud, using more cloud solutions, has led into a world where everything evolves very fast. What we're living today and the new features and enhancements that we can see in the security platforms we operate in the course of 1 year is what we used to see in the course of 5 years, if you go back 5 years. So that constant pace of evolution, new features or features that are changing, it changes the security configuration of that stack you have implemented. On top of that, the reality of the co-managed environment, when our analyst could make a mistake and change a configuration that's not supposed to be changed, or my client's analyst could do the same thing. And bottom line, it doesn't matter who changes it. It doesn't matter if it's just because it's a new feature that nobody never configured before. The reality is a weak security configuration leads into the possibility of a breach. To prevent that, we need a method that cannot be manual. It needs to be automated. It needs to run independent of human work cycles. It needs to be constant, and it needs to surface what's important as opposed to what's really noise. And that's where, when we found Senserva and we started talking about the solution and we started putting it together and putting it into our environment, the value we see. We can maintain that configuration. We can be informed and know about changes, react to those changes on the speed we need to, but more importantly, react to the ones that are most important. There are changes that are really of no consequence. There are other changes that are so important that they could cripple your ability to defend against different threats. So to answer your question, how does this materialize for a company that is running security operations on behalf of other clients over the Microsoft security stack, looking into M365 and Azure environments? This is how. It's that day-to-day ability to go and see if there are any configuration changes. And now a step further, from the operational perspective, we are always evolving our configuration. So the next configuration that will be deployed is always in the works. And knowing the gap between the current configuration and the next is very important when we sit down with our clients and have the conversations about how are we going to evolve your security posture into the next steps, and what are the changes you need to make to your environment. So if I can load my future perfect configuration or golden configuration into a system that will compare it with the current state of all my clients, and then give me a delta that I can go talk to my client about, not as a drift, as something that needs to be corrected, but as an upgrade and changes that are coming down the pipe so we can plan together. That also has been huge for us and provided tremendous impact in the way we operate.
Gotcha. And I have to say that every time we speak, the magnitude of the scale of the problem that you face on a day-to-day basis is further impressed upon me, and so I really I'm glad in some small way that we're able to be part of that solution, because there's not an type of organization in the world that deals with this in a more direct way than you do. So thank you for that perspective. Mm-hmm. On to Jim, as you have to, hearing this and hearing Rod and talk about, I'm kind of interested in your perspective of how business owners, either at large, either small mom and pops, medium-sized enterprises, large enterprises, how does this notion kind of affect the way that you look at cybersecurity and computer security? Beyond these, you think at some point you have 5 tools and you're all set, and suddenly you've got tools that are necessary to manage the tools. And how does your mind work when you're confronted with this type of situation?
Thanks, Clay, and thanks for the introduction. Just a quick correction, and the audience will figure it out really quickly. I'm not a CISO. It says on my picture I'm a CISO, so you'll figure that out quickly. I come at it truly from the business side of things. To me, it's really interesting because as I sit and listen to this, the first part of the conversation, I'm going to share with the challenges my firm and I'm having getting people to pay attention to configuration drift. And based on the early conversation, it's shocking to me, but I get it. So that's how I'm going to come at this. Configuration drift management is a significant business risk in my client's IT environment. If you think about the base issue, configuration drift occurs when configurations of systems deviate from their intended state over time due to unauthorized changes, updates, or human error. Pretty basic stuff. Some of the key business risks I see associated with configuration drift are there's security vulnerabilities. Ricardo's talked about them. Drift can introduce security gaps, make systems more susceptible to attacks. As Senserva CEO Mark Shavlik always says, we're only as good as our weakest or maybe our most devious colleague. And that's a scary thing. My clients are literally spending millions on reducing security risk, but not so much on the drift component of it. There are compliance issues, and Rod touched upon some of the compliance issues, but unauthorized changes can lead to non-compliance with either regulatory standards, resulting in fines and audits. It can lead to insurance issues. If you're getting cyber insurance, you've got to comply with these things. If you read yesterday's Wall Street Journal, you probably saw the story about one of Disney's engineers who downloaded free software from GitHub and exposed their entire environment to a hacker named Nullbudge. According to the article, Disney quickly controlled the breach, and I'll bet that they immediately went into compliance mode. I'll also bet that if they hadn't pushed configuration compliance on their entire employee group, this could have been a tremendously painful hack. As we all say, it's very difficult to avoid sloppy security practices by humans, which just makes the elimination of configuration drift that much more important. All of my CIO clients are looking for operational efficiencies. Drift can cause inconsistencies across environments, leading to application failures, downtime, and increased troubleshooting efforts. Having inconsistent, lax, or poor review and application of configuration management costs unmeasured millions of dollars a year. It's hard to put a handle on that, but think about the Disney breach. What did that just cost? If you're not managing configuration drift, you're really saying, I'm okay accepting a lost opportunity because I don't have time or interest in avoiding, managing, minimizing issues before they occur. To me, it's like playing third base. Nobody wants to play third base because the ball comes really fast. It's a really long throw. This is kind of a boring topic to most people, but it's actually really, really critical. And my last thought on this is not utilizing an automated way to manage configuration drift leads to increased costs. I hear all the time that addressing drift-related issues using automation will be, first of all, an initial investment. But what's really costly and hard to measure are the costs of the hit to your brand when something that was preventable happens. Again, look at Disney. How many delighted customers read yesterday's WSJ and figure, geez, did my data get stolen? I gave them my credit card at check-in. They know my kids' ages and names. The increased cost to fix a problem and the associated risks to your brand are way beyond operational costs. If you're having trouble believing me, just go ask Disney, see what they have to say. So knowing that your system configuration management is beyond reproach will help many businesses and IT leaders sleep better at night. We all know that if it's not, we all know it's not if you're going to get hacked, but when, right? We say that all the time. Knowing how to quickly and confidentially isolate an issue is worth its weight in gold. That's what Senserva does. It helps clients do that. Avoid, limit, and mitigate risk when an issue occurs and recover quickly. The automation solid processes that Senserva provides will help us all sleep better. And I put this together in this first to respond to this first question because I'm having trouble getting CIOs and directors and VPs in IT to pay attention to this. They've all got it covered, and I'll address that a little later, but everybody's got it covered. And like I said, it's like playing third base. It's boring until something bad happens.
Yeah. Jim, thanks a lot for that. And the one thing I took a lot out of that, and I was taking some notes here too. But I think the one thing that's vitally important for everyone to remember is that that you have to look at it from a business owner's perspective. You have to look at it from what is the cost of failure, right? In the past, an organization, my data record, at an organization 15, 20 years ago would fit on a piece of paper. They knew 9 things about me, perhaps. Now you look at what Disney knows about their customers, you can write a book. That's the more as these companies know more and more about us, the exposure gets greater and greater. So I really appreciate that insight there. I did notice, and we had a couple of people chatting about it, it's like from a timekeeping perspective, I think we're doing okay, but we may end up speeding up a little bit. So Ricardo, I'm going to come back to you here and ask you a question about is this a thankless task? I mean, do your customers, the organizations that you serve, do they notice this, or is this something that they only see in the absence? It's like trying to see darkness. How is this value? How do they see the value of this, and how do you present it to them as an organization?
It's an interesting question, because when we started implementing this technology, the way I communicated this to our clients was, imagine we are an F1 racing team and we have created this tool. This tool is not for the audience, it's not for the pilot. This tool is for the mechanics, for how to help them to tune the car, to help them to create the better car for the race. So that being said, meaning that this tool will not go directly in front of a client, the results of this tuning, the results of this analysis will contribute to something that is really, really important that we try to drive with all of our clients. That's called security posture improvement. Your security posture is a sum of many different things. We're going to look into something like how many global admins you have on your tenant. You're not supposed to have 15. To your email security and so many other things. And the existence of a drift detection solution brings another dimension to security posture. Because it's very common to consider security posture starting with your vulnerabilities, starting with the weaknesses in the software, in your Windows, in your applications, in your servers, and then you go to your network, and then you analyze your network communication patterns and your firewall rules, and out of that you go into your tenant and you look into your M365, but then there's no dimension to cover something that is responsible for almost 80% of the breaches we have today, which is misconfiguration. It goes back to the principles of security hygiene. One of the principles of security hygiene is make sure your configuration is okay. So in that sense, our clients appreciate that so much. That is impressive, because it's the unspoken thing that right. When you say and when you position it that way, then they ask themselves, how come we didn't pay attention to this for so long? But that's right. The impact it has had for us.
You're fascinating insight, and also gratifying that the organizations are starting to wrap their heads around that and
yes.
recognize that. Jim, back to you for a second, Jim. From the organizations that you talk to, what percentage of them do they actually recognize that this is a real security issue, or is it sometimes you get to the deer in the headlights, I don't know what you're talking about look? Do people say, I got it, I'm trying to figure it out, what do you recommend? There's probably some people in the middle. Kind of how is the overall marketplace split on where they are with this?
Clay, it's a great question. I just noted Ricardo's comment that 80% of security issues start here in this area. So with all due respect to my leadership friends in IT, I've had numerous conversations about configuration drift and security. And here's what happens. Most of the time I get the look from the folks and they say, they glaze over a little bit. You know, I talk with them a little more, they glaze over a little more. Maybe it's me, maybe it's the topic. And then I get the standard reply, yep, we've got this covered. My network guys are all over this. And they assure me that our configuration management is solid. And I ask them, how do they know? And I get another blank look. Often I get a reply implying that the conversation has gone long enough, they want to get out of it. Other times I get the reply that I trust my team. I'm a bit like Ronald Reagan, trust but verify. So beyond my own thoughts, what does the data say about drift? Despite the availability of tools like Senserva's, a significant number of industry leaders still manage drift manually. From my experience, I'd say the majority of them. And my experience isn't all inclusive, but we're seeing it more and more and more. We're seeing less people jumping into a tool like Senserva's, and most people are still doing it manually. According to a recent study, 61% of data leaders cited manual security operations as a factor in delaying initiatives. So it's not only the security component of it, but the manualness of it is you're delaying initiatives, you're delaying rolling out product, you're delaying being first to the market. Those costs are really hard to quantify, but those are also really critical costs in running a business. Additionally, many organizations underestimate the importance of maintaining consistent configurations, leading to costly system failures and security vulnerabilities. These simple examples show the clear need for widespread adoption of automated tools and processes to manage configuration drift effectively. To me, in its simplest form, it's applying a bot to a critical mundane task. The analogy I use is, 30 years ago, people had security guards watch their homes. Today, they use interconnected cameras that can alert and notify us, in just a couple of seconds. Ultimately, the automation of home security has removed much of the human error. Automating drift security is the same. Let's remove human error. Let's remove people overlooking. Let's remove people intentionally not complying with the configuration. I believe eventually all companies will automate. The question is when and what's it going to take to make it happen? Because as I said earlier on, I'm still getting the deer in the headlights. I'm still getting the, hey, I don't want to talk about this at this point in time. It's not critical.
Right. Okay. Thanks, Jim. And one of the things that you did, and pretty much everyone else is doing this too, which I really appreciate, is using some hard numbers and some statistics that really point out, because it's very easy to have these high level fluffy discussions, but when we actually start to talk about things that we know of that actually come down into percentages or dollar values, it really kind of brings this home. And speaking of bringing this home, Rod, can you circle this back around? If you could speak about how is it specifically in our case, in Senserva's case, how does this type of tool help maximize the investment that, in Microsoft security tools that organizations have in their enterprise, and the value that it brings in laying this on top of those tools?
Well, yeah, I appreciate that. That's one of the things that, I work with and I think about quite a bit, because at Microsoft, obviously, we have a lot of investment in our security tools over time, right? So over the past 5-6 years, I tell you what, before I joined Microsoft, if you would have ever have told me that Microsoft was a security company, I would have laughed at your face. But over the past 10 years or so, we have worked significantly hard to develop solutions around that to ensure that our customers can secure their environments, no matter what their environment looks like. Or, but it's a thing where you actually have to use the tools, right? Number one, but then you also have to identify your own environment and how those tools function, how they work, make sure they're utilized, but also identify where the gaps are. One of the things that I truly appreciate about the Senserva product is its ability to constantly monitor, right? So there's the automation piece. I'm a data guy, right? So I'm a cybersecurity person. I worked in a SIEM, in a SOC, worked with a SIEM. I know that the data that is the most important aspect of any security product. But I also do know that even certain products or certain tools can be limited in the types of information they collect, or the types of data that they accept. And that being the case, one of the things that I truly like about this Senserva product is the ability to constantly monitor and gather that data that can be used somewhere else in a SOC, in a SIEM, that can be utilized to identify those things and work with the other existing tools, integrate in a way with that data upload or that data ingestion, so that we can kind of look holistically across the environment to know where those configuration changes actually produce security issues. And we talked a little bit earlier, and we've talked all along about the security aspect. And I really, really want to highlight this because we talk about configuration drift. And if you've been anyone on this call, in this webinar has been in IT or experienced IT for any length of time, you've always heard about configuration drift or configuration changes or compliance and things like this. But it truly is a security issue. I think that's where we kind of have to change this mindset. Going back to what Jim was talking from a business perspective, right? There is a very real cost to being non-compliant. There is a very real cost cybersecurity. And we have to produce, particularly from these configuration changes, we have to be able to know that these are happening or these exist within our environment. So when I think about the Senserva solution, it's literally a critical extra layer of defense that kind of overlays on top of the existing solutions so that it continuously protects the integrity of even the Microsoft environments, protects the integrity of, let's say, Defender for Endpoint or Intune, to be able to identify those configuration changes even there, and enables the business to maximize these security investments: Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, Defender for Cloud, Microsoft Sentinel. Those security investments, it's an additional layer to ensure that you can actually utilize those and maximize them with confidence. Brings trust, I think. It's that extra layer of trust. Everybody wants that extra layer of trust.
Right. No. Yeah. No. That's. I think that's spot on. Jim, a question now for you. You know, as in back out, and I'm always very curious as to kind of the voice of the customer and what people are thinking. Is that when people think about drift management in organizations, do they, you know, one of the things that people are always worried about is human utilization and people and staffing requirements. Do they see this as the potential to, you know, to repurpose people, or to have, you know, think this is something that they have an army of scripters working on right now that they can turn over to a tool? You know, are they looking at the human element in terms of when they're trying to create an ROI story for this? Kind of how just give me some insight into how they look at this from a people perspective.
Yeah, thanks, Clay. I'll start a little bit with the ROI component of it. The ROI is really difficult to capture in a short meeting like this. It's so dependent on each organization's makeup. It's so dependent on the size of the organization, et cetera, et cetera. To truly measure either savings potential or realignment of staff potential, I strongly encourage people to do a true cost benefit analysis to see what their organization's spending today on security and configuration, and include in those numbers soft costs, because you'll get the people savings, you'll get the opportunity savings, but what you're going to miss unless you do a true CBA is you're going to miss delayed migrations, delayed implementations, security breaches. All of these things, I know they're soft costs. I know my professors in my MBA classes years and years ago in finance said, hey, you can't quantify soft costs. And I'll say, BS, you sure can. And if you don't believe you can quantify soft costs, call Disney. Disney's going through this right now, and the soft cost to them having the breach they had, I've got to imagine is huge. Some of the general areas that we're seeing firms say, hey, look, if I get my drift under control, I can have additional innovation and development. And these are going to be categories. They're not going to be actual opportunities or savings because, as I said earlier on, without really understanding the organization, without really understanding where you're going, I could just give you some high level examples. You can do more security enhancements. With more resources available, companies can strengthen their security posture. You can improve the customer experience. You can optimize processes and have process optimization around drift. The point is, you really want to take a look at it as your organization and say, what are my inputs? What are my savings going to be? And then again, what are the opportunities I'm going to receive or I'm going to be able to take advantage of by putting in an automated tool like this? Go back to my simple example of home security. I mean, everybody's got video cameras now. We're not paying security companies to come and check on us. What am I doing with that money as an individual? What opportunities do I have with that?
Right. No. I think that's right. And appreciate the input on how that this is always a people issue for organizations, and it ends up being one of the biggest considerations when organizations are looking at deploying software. Ricardo, on to you. A question is like from a tool set and a capability perspective, how does the ability to use Senserva's drift management solution help like your value proposition and ROI story when you're selling your capabilities to potential customers?
Well, it's been a big differentiator for us for the last, I want to say, year or year and a half since we started working together, because to be quite honest, a year ago, nobody was even thinking about it.
Right.
And it's really that, bottom line, it goes back to the sales cycle, and everybody understands that we are a security provider. There is a sales cycle to our sales teams to go and talk to clients and show the value of our approach to security operations management. And having that solution, having that talk point, just say when we get to the part where we talk about posture improvement, that having our services is not only about having an alert service that will ingest your logs and spit alerts that you're going to have to take care of. We work with you. We're an extension of your team, and we work to improve your security posture. This really helps us to show how our value goes beyond the traditional vulnerability assessment, and here is our list, or the quick review of your tenant against, I don't know, Microsoft best practices, some other best practices, and here is your laundry list of things that you can do. And in the market today, almost all the providers that are serious about providing a good service, they do all that. It's been to us a really big differentiator when we communicate the value of the service we provide, that when we talk about security posture improvement, we tackle it from different angles. It's that whole conversation about, oh, we have a holistic approach. Well, please define holistic. What are the angles that you cover? If you're calling it a holistic approach, please define your whole. Well, the entirety of the things that are in my set of things that I call holistic are right now more than most of my competitors, and that's my advantage.
Right. No, that's brilliant, and that's music to our ears, because we're aware that as the world kind of wakes up to this problem that Rod has correctly said has been around for a lot longer than people actually care to talk about, that value can be articulated so effectively as you just noted. On to Rod, a quick, here's a question for you, Rod. This is a little bit off the script. One of the things that we're starting to really focus on, and I'm interested in your perspective on it, is the notion of detection versus remediation, and and how you see that playing out, and the value that brings into into the product space.
Well, to be honest, I think from the dawn of IT civilization, if you want to call it that, there's always been this approach, by the geeks in IT. We want to literally automate everything, or at least automate the things that are appropriate, and the things that we can control and manage. I think in that space, from the monitoring and the collection to the remediation, I think there's a really big opportunity there, right? Because again, we're looking at cyber or security world where a lot of the monitoring is going on, but you still have a lot of effort, a lot of time that's being taken by these security individuals, security engineers, people part of security operations centers, and they literally spend their entire day doing this whole cybersecurity thing, right? And when we talk about a configuration drift, and we can somehow fit this into that that security area, and we can control that piece of it, well, think about how much more time, how much more efficient those individuals can be, the more that we can automate. Obviously, we don't want to automate to oblivion, because in a lot of cases, we have to be very careful about what we do. For example, someone clicks on an email, it goes out to a weird website, it downloads a payload in the background, and then, obviously there's a phishing story, not unlike Disney probably. But in that respect, there's a lot of effort that goes into to monitor, to know that that's happening, to know that it actually is something significant. But that person could be the CEO. The CEO is out on a sales trip, has a PowerPoint presentation, and now they have been quarantined so that they can't access their configuration or their PC anymore. We have to be super careful about how and what we automate. So there has to be a piece of that where we can say, okay, yes, please do that in this case, right? So I think a lot more is going to be automated as we go along. A lot of that remediation is going to be automated, but we have to be super careful about it. So a configuration tool where you can just get the data, monitor the data, and then identify those things in a very organized way to determine what you automate, I think is going to be super critical, instead of just accepting the defaults like a lot of people do sometimes.
Right. No. Thanks for that insight, because it is a a bit of a sea change that we're starting to hear, and we're actually reacting to and being on the forefront. But I was very interested to have you share your deep thoughts on that with the panelists and with our audience as well. Recognize the time. I'm gonna skip ahead, and we're gonna move. What I'm gonna like to do is I'm gonna ask everyone just to give a regarding drift mesh, either a cautionary tale, something anecdotal, something humorous, or something insightful that that is through your experiences, and we've all been in this doing this for quite a while. That would be interesting. It would be interesting to share. And everyone's going to have a few seconds to think about this, but I'm gonna go to Jim first, because he always seems like he's got the best stories. And I'll start out with you, Jim. If you just want to spend a few minutes and kind of give us a closing remark, that would be great.
Yep. Thanks, Clay. I appreciate it. And I'll try to stay tight to the script. I did some research before this webinar, and I want to share two stats really quick. According to a recent study by SecureFrame, of the last 110 data breaches that occurred in 2024, 74% of all the breaches include the human element. Ricardo reflected really similar data. Additionally, according to a study done by Business Wire, 94% of organizations have experienced insider data breaches. I mean, think about what that says. It's coming from within. It's not coming from Russia. I mean, I know about Russia, I know about that, but from the reality is, it's our people making mistakes. It's our people doing quote unquote dumb things. Listening to Ricardo and listening to Rod today, it just reflects on Senserva to me. I always say it's not what you do, it's how you do it. And if I look at the talent we have here on the screen with you three gentlemen, and it's not what, it's how. It's how you apply your knowledge. It's how you apply your years of experience. It's how you approach it. Ricardo says that the quote was, he's got 80% of all breaches come from internal. You know, you guys know this. The Senserva team knows this. You've automated as much as you can, and you're going to use your experience and approach this problem, I believe, like no one else does. And that's my kind of summary on Senserva. You know what you're doing, but more importantly, you know how to do it.
Great, Jim. Thanks for that insight, and also those kind words. I appreciate, and the entire team does as well. Ricardo, I'm gonna turn to you and get your thoughts.
Sure. So my story is going to be about cars, right? When we're driving, we are always concerned about our blind spots. That's why you check over your shoulder. That's why you sometimes perk your head a little bit forward to make sure that there's nothing on your blind spot before you change lanes or before you make a turn. This is true on our life in security as well, because what really comes and sneaks up on us, and that breach that we never anticipated, and something, it comes from one of those blind spots. So every time we think about a service, every time we talk about technologies and all that, if you observe the evolution in the protective technologies that we use today, since we were only talking about very simple antivirus till today, our goal is to cover as many of those blind spots as we can. We today have evolved to a role that you have to think about security for cloud, something different from on-prem. Depending on the systems you have in cloud and on-prem, they even go more and more branches and more branches and more branches. When we apply security drift management to that picture, we are taking care of yet another blind spot. One that everybody knows about, but nobody has come with a solution that makes it effective to manage it, right? Other than this, what you have to do is you have to dedicate someone that say, your task is to monthly go through this 3,000 item checklist and make sure that they are all checked and in the right places, and that's also subject to human error. Well, there is that, and there is also adding this as yet another layer. So we are very comfortable talking about security in layers or security in depth or the onion thing that we have many layers and all that. But if you bring that back to a very interesting mathematical concept, is the concept of compounded probability. So each one of the layers has its own probability of something going wrong in there. So let's say the first one is 10%, the second one is 20%, the second one is third one is 5%, and so on and so forth. And when you combine or compound all those probabilities of something going wrong from all those layers, you end up with something like 1%, 0.5%. It's never going to be zero. And we all know that we're not in the game of making it perfect. We all know that we're not in the game of finding the silver bullet. But that's why. That's because the key of that is as many layers as you can put because of the compounded probability, right? It's as simple as that. So to me, it's about mitigating blind spots and increasing the good results of my compounded probability by adding yet another layer.
Right, and thank you for that, because I love the blind spot analogy. You know, that's so appropriate here, and then just finishing up with that, some really insightful angles on probability. Rod, we're gonna finish up with you. I just got to get kind of your take on where we are, what's that, and kind of how this is all turning out. Oh, you're on mute, Rod.
I am on mute. I was like, man, I don't want to be the one to do that. But it was. But no, what I was saying, I said, thank you, Clay. Thanks for that ability to do that. Thank you for my colleagues today too, because I've learned a lot as well. But like a Seinfeld episode, I appreciate it. I get to kind of tell the story full circle here. But seriously, when you think about this, right? If you're going to do it manually, you're probably not going to do it, or you're going to become complacent and it's not going to be done, right? You absolutely need a tool, right, to be able to accomplish this. And that's where I kind of want to go with this, is that if there's a tool available for you to do it, maybe you should check it out, right? And I want to go back to the monitoring aspect. Security drift, to me, is absolutely a growing concern. Let's just call it one of the silent killers, right, if you will, because it's those things that you don't think about that's really, just as like Ricardo was talking about, the blind side, right? I've been in situations with customers that if they had only had a tool, right, a tool in place that monitors those changes for things like accounts, services, applications, those changes that applications make. A lot of organizations these days are developing their own AI chatbots. And so there's a lot of development going on that if we would just, I always had this argument with developers, if we would only develop securely in the first place, we wouldn't need all these defenders in the world and all these tools, but it is the way it is. But if they had something, a tool to monitor this, instead of having to become complacent and not having a tool, they could have foregone some serious struggles, and a couple cases that I'm very aware of, embarrassment and economic loss, right? Just literally due to non-compliant systems. And that goes back to that business aspect. So you need the tool, there's that technology, but it also affects the business in a severe case. So just like Ricardo said, nobody likes to be blindsided, particularly if there were ways to avoid it. So that's something definitely want to check out. And I would hope from our discussion today, this is something that you've already flagged on your to-do list to go check this out a little more.
Great. Thanks for that, Rod. Cognizant of the time, we've used up almost exactly our hour there. We worked pretty hard at sticking to that. First of all, I want to thank the panelists for this discussion. This was incredibly insightful. I had high expectations, and this exceeded them. I learned a ton. I hope everyone that was watching did. We did have a couple of questions come in, but we're going to run out of time. What I'm going to do is we do have everyone's email address, and I will send those. We'll try and answer those separately to those. There is a companion PowerPoint that I'm going to send out as well, along with a link for the replay of this, so you could watch it over and over again or share it with your colleagues. But again, so that's going to do it for us today. But again, thanks for the panel again, and thanks everyone for watching. Have a great day, and look forward to the email from us. Thanks, everyone.